So, good morning. Kay Miller with you here, 580 KIDO. So, back to this new whitehouse.gov website. I got to tell you, here's the deal. You can put an online petition, and if the jabronis at the White House think that you're worthy, they're actually going to look into it. So, I think, coming up, between now and Christmas, we should send a present to Obama. And that should be, we should have a petition to recall him. Now, constitutionally speaking, I don't know if you could do that, but wouldn't that be great if we had 5,000, 10,000 petitions from the great state of Idaho to recall President Obama, and his jabronis at whitehouse.gov had to take a look at that? I think that's funny. Anyway, once again, I don't get out much. But one thing we will be doing this weekend is checking out the Broncos versus the Bulldogs. We go live now to the heart of enemy country, the great state of Georgia. Our good friend, the real Ray Steele, joining us this morning at 580 KIDO. Some would say an intercontinental champion. He'll always be our champion, the people's champion. Ray, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. It is a pleasure to talk to the voice of Boise. Whether or not Boise recognizes that, I'm not sure if they do or not, but they should. It's good to talk to you, my friend.
Well, Ray, and we'll just call you Rock here, based on your many, many years of service to our great nation. Rock, what's the buzz like, not only in the state of Georgia, but throughout the country as the Broncos flew in last night to check out the Bulldogs?
Well, the buzz down here is that the Georgia fans believe they are going to pull an upset. I say that, but I don't know if they really, truly, honestly believe that. They want to believe it, but they don't necessarily believe in Mark Richt, the head coach, because of his struggles over the past season. Now, let's be honest, Kevin. Mark Richt, doing what he's done at Georgia the last few years at any school, say, outside the SEC, well, maybe at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, he would be considered a wild success. But outside the SEC, Mark Richt may have a job for life, or at least a job for a long time. At Georgia, not good enough. Even beating rival Georgia Tech, finally, which he did last year, is not good enough for the Georgia fan. So Georgia wants to believe in this team. They say they believe in this team. A lot of them are predicting what many would consider an upset if Georgia does beat Boise State tomorrow. But I'm not sure if their heart is really in it. I particularly their heart sank when, and you may have seen this within the past week or so, when Georgia unveiled the special uniforms that they will be wearing for this game tomorrow night, which, call me crazy, it makes you think of Boise State. Makes you think of a Boise State-type uniform, meaning modern-looking, not traditional, certainly nothing that you would see in the Southeastern Conference out of a respectable SEC school anyway. It just looks horrible, Kevin. It looks really bad. And I think that kind of sank the hearts of a lot of Georgia fans when they saw those uniforms come out. They're not going out there in their traditional red and black. They're going out in this gray mishmash superhero costume, in essence. And I think Georgia fans are, frankly, I think they're hoping to avoid a beatdown tomorrow.
Well, you're an optimist coming from the great state of Georgia. But, first of all, I don't think that Georgia's ever recovered from the back in black where they all dressed in black and Alabama just pummeled them. But in reality, Georgia hasn't been anything since the great Herschel Walker. Again, they've not been a player in the national title game, and really that's how it's judged down there. And it's amazing that you think about this. Here you have this program, Boise State, that has come to the forefront in the last 10 or 20 years, really. A great winning record. People will say, well, it's easy when you go up against inferior competition. However, everybody has the chance to do that, like a Utah, like a TCU, and you have the consistency here you have a program with a stadium of maybe 33,000 at most, outspent, outgunned, perhaps even some would say better talent on other schools, and yet they go into the heart of Dixie to the Georgia Dome, and you have one of the college football royalty, the Georgia Bulldogs, trying to come up with an upset.
Well, Boise State is a remarkable story. Now, you say outspent. I don't know. The NCAA is on Boise State's tail now, so maybe not so much outspent, at least not the last few years. That remains to be seen.
Now, hold on. Let me
of that investigation.
Let me hold on, Mr. Independent Prosecutor. The allegations were something to do with women's tennis and the violations on the football team. Boy, I'm not defensive here, am I, John Jenkins? But anyway, the other that the kids actually were spending the night and had a free meal. Very different from, let's say, Cam Newton or other allegations within the SEC.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. There are plenty of allegations throughout the SEC, particularly with Cam Newton, and certainly I don't think the Cam Newton story is over by any stretch of the imagination. We're going to see a whole heck of a lot come out. That, I think, is going to turn into a Reggie Bush situation before all is said and done. But we're not talking about Auburn. We're not talking about the fluke teams that got by with, one of the highest paid players in college football, allegedly, last year, all the way to a national title. We're talking about the rest of the SEC, the tradition, the powerhouse,
sure, exactly,
year after year after year. Alabama, in particular, with Nick Saban.
Five
Florida,
national titles.
Exactly.
5 national titles in a row. So here you have this great conference that just lured away a pretty good team nationally, Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. You've got one of the premier members hoping for an upset against a team from Boise, Idaho.
Well, and again, a lot of this has to do, let's go back to Boise here. Yes, credit is due to Boise for what they have built up there in their environment. Have they played some legit competition? Certainly. Everybody plays some legit competition. Back when Nebraska was dominating the old Big Eight, back when we were kids, Kevin, they would play some legit competition.
Right.
They'd play Oklahoma every year. They'd play a bowl game, and that would be pretty much it. They'd beat everybody else. They'd invite New Mexico State to come in and get a 96-0 whipping. So Boise State's kind of in that situation right now. Yes, they've changed conferences. They've moved up to a slightly stronger conference. We say slightly because some of those teams bolted for even better conferences once Boise started calling. Now, you might argue, and some of the Boise faithful might argue, well, they saw Boise coming, they wanted to tuck their tails and run. Whatever. Still, the point is, Boise still is not in the top-to-bottom strong conference like the Southeastern Conference.
But apparently they don't have to be number one. And number two, and I say this with respect to you, again, a diehard football fan, a professional that's covered the sport in that region for many, many years. From your perspective, when have you ever heard of a team from the SEC really being, let's not say afraid, concerned, or the underdog against a non-automatic qualifier?
Outside of the Vanderbilts and the teams from Mississippi, you're right. It doesn't happen. Well, let's lump Kentucky in there, too. It doesn't happen. With the Georgias, the Alabama schools, the Tennessees, the Floridas especially, it doesn't happen. Let's be honest. In the minds of the SEC fan, it should not be this way. However, Boise, coming off monster season after monster season after monster season, the Georgia Bulldogs, yes, all the tradition is there, but they've come up, they've had mediocre season after mediocre season, and they're coming off a loss to, let's be honest, a pretty good Central Florida team in the Liberty Bowl last year. But, of course, Central Florida in the Georgia Bulldogs fan mind might as well be New Mexico State.
Yeah,
New Mexico State here.
There's no excuse for that. So here you have redemption. Let's face it, I think that if Georgia loses, they're going to get thrown out of the SEC.
No, they're not going to get thrown out of the SEC, but Mark Richt may get thrown out of a job. And that might not be entirely fair to Mark Richt to lose to what appears to be another legitimately good Boise State team, but that's the mindset down here. The Georgia Bulldogs are not supposed to be underdogs, especially on their home turf, maybe not necessarily their home stadium, but this is practically their home stadium. It's practically a home game for Georgia. They should be the favorite, even if it's only by a touchdown. They should be the ones in the favored column, and they're not here. So Mark Richt knows his job is on the line, maybe with this one game. Even if he lasts a few more games into the season, if he loses in Atlanta to Boise State, especially if it's a big loss. If it's a big loss, he might be gone Sunday. Who knows? But if he loses that game, I think Mark Richt is done at some point this year as Georgia's coach.
Now, before we get to the game, Ray Steele joining us from Georgia here, talking about the Broncos versus the Bulldogs. Last night, one of our friends, or not one of our friends, but one of the jabronis on TV actually did, I thought, an interesting piece on the varsity. And, of course, I guess the varsity uses like truckloads and truckloads or train car loads of Idaho potatoes, one of the institutions within the South. And having been to the varsity several times, and my physique does resemble people that go there, Could you tell us a little bit about the culture for people that may are going down there or that are down there right now? A little different from Idaho down there.
Okay, the Varsity is, first of all, one of those legendary places that you just have to experience, where it's been there forever. There's one in Athens, Georgia as well, near the University of Georgia campus, but the one that most people think of is the one in Atlanta, and you can see it right off of I-75 as you drive through the heart of downtown Atlanta. It's just one of those places that you have to experience. Yes, the food is bad for you, especially if you eat too much for it. That's the point, though. This isn't Michelle Obama growing your own garden in your backyard here. This is down-home, greasy hamburgers, slightly greasy fries, hot dogs, and that's what you get. The chili dog there is to die for. And not only that, it's just the experience of being there, because you're kind of herded into a line, because half the world is going to be there when you go, no matter what time you go to the Varsity. You're herded into a line, you place your order, and then whoever takes your order yells some gibberish-sounding code for what you have ordered back to the kitchen, and you would never be able to decipher what the person who took your order said to the kitchen, but all you know is you're going to get something that's really dadgum good. And dadgum, I don't know if you've translated dadgum for the folks in Boise yet, all the time you spent in the South. It's going to be pretty dadgum good once you get that order, regardless of what you order at the Varsity. You really need to, if you're down here for the game, check it out.
It's the modern equivalent, I think, of the Saturday Night Live deli or whatever, where it was cheeseburger.
It's a little bit like that, except it's on a much larger scale, because you've got lines where you order practically stretching from door to door inside that restaurant. So it is something to behold, and your stomach will not betray you. You might need the antacid, admittedly, after you get through there, but it'll be well worth it if you do it at least one time while you're in Atlanta.
Ray Steele, please stand by. Much more coming up with Ray Steele, The Rock, joining us from Georgia, breaking down the big game for you at 580 KIDO.